This is the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on a Thursday evening. You are probably listening to this on a Friday morning before the Cubs and Brewers start up a big series at Wrigley Field. But for now, we are here to talk about the Cubs taking 3 of 4 from the Miami Marlins at Wrigley Field. Should have been a sweep, but we'll get over it. I'm over it. I don't know about you, Brendan. And doing so, it was the walk-off series, ladies and gentlemen. Kris Bryant with a walk-off home run, followed by Jason Hayward with a walk-off home run. The first time the Cubs have won back-to-back games on walk-off home runs since 1998. Another very fun year for the Chicago Cubs, though I think Brendan and I were about 6 and 7 respectively. So our memories of that are a little shaky, but still, I remember having a lot of fun in 1998. We will break down all 4 of those games. We will highlight those walk-off home runs for sure. This was a coming-out party of sorts for Bryzzo. We had already noted that they were heating up or had already heated up, but things boiling over in this series, if you will, as Kris Bryant is red hot, folks. We warned anyone who may not have believed in Kris Bryant pretty much since the beginning of the year and certainly all through the offseason, not to doubt this man, that he was healthy and that he is going to remind people that he is one of the best players in Major League Baseball, no hyperbole, and he is doing just that. So we will take a look at all of those things. We will talk about a certain pitcher. I'll leave you guys in suspense for at least just a second here, who, if he had pitched a couple more innings and were qualified, he would be the Major League Baseball ERA leader. Again, I'll leave you in suspense to figure out which pitcher that is, but we are going to talk about him in excruciating detail, I hope, if Brendan will allow it. And we do have some roster moves to discuss. Ben Zobrist to the restricted list, Pedro Strop to the injured list, Mike Montgomery called up, and unfortunately the Cubs have made the decision to bring Addison Russell back, as we stated back when he was tendered a contract and when he was suspended in the first place. Brendan and I disappointed that the Cubs are keeping him in the organization and ultimately bringing him back, but that is unfortunately not our decision to make, so we will talk about that decision. But we do, let me recap these 4 games with the Marlins to kind of set the stage for everything that is going on here, and then we will move on to that wide array of topics that I just laid out. So on Monday, this was a rather frustrating game, coming off a series where the Cubs sweep the St. Louis Cardinals out of Wrigley Field in mostly dominant fashion throughout the weekend. The Cubs drop the opener with the Miami Marlins. If there's a more baseball thing than the Cubs sweeping, at the time, the first-place Cardinals to take first place, and then losing a game to, I think, the worst, or at least one of the worst teams in baseball, I'm not sure what it is. This is baseball in a nutshell, folks. But this game started well, and it started with Anthony Rizzo hitting his 9th home run of the season. He would add more later in the series. That made it 2-0. A Wilson Contreras single made it 3-0. So after the first inning, the Cubs already up 3-0. They looked well on their way to an 8-game winning streak, is what it would have been at the time. The Marlins get within 1 in the 3rd. They tie things up on a John Birdie home run in the 6th inning. No offense to John Birdie, but who, Brendan? Anyway, in the bottom of the 6th, Kyle Schwarber's single gives the Cubs a 1-run lead. But in the top of the 9th, Pedro Strop falls apart. And I think this, may be a good time to discuss this. Pedro Strop has a grade 2 hamstring strain, so he will be out for probably at least a month, I think, were the initial assessments on that. This is, I think, the same injury that he had last season, if you recall him running to first in Washington in that makeup game. And, the kind of timeline on that, he did make it back for the wild card game, but then reported afterward that he was in excruciating pain doing it. So it's going to be a minute with him. So The Marlins took a 6-4 lead in the ninth inning, and Kris Bryant got the Cubs within one with his fifth homer. He was, like Rizzo, not done in this series in terms of the long ball, not by a long shot, but that made it 6-5. The Cubs could not add any more, and they dropped this one. If you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you were reading about this Strop situation and thinking, boy, Brendan is going to be pissed off about this one. Yeah. Strop reported feeling the hamstring, I think, back to that series in Arizona. Took time off in Seattle, tried again against St. Louis, felt it a little bit, but felt he could push through it, and then ultimately throwing in this Miami game, it was too much. They go for the MRI and all that. Brendan, we've talked about this medical staff before. I am not a doctor, nor do I pretend to be one on TV, but when you have a relief pitcher who had this exact same injury, when was September? 7 months ago, 8 months ago, however long ago that was. The minute he says it doesn't feel right, even if he says it just feels a little off, he should not be back on the mound until he's had an MRI. I don't understand what their process was here. And, you're kind of left with two thoughts here, right? Either he had a grade 2 hamstring strain and was allowed to pitch through it a couple times, or he had a lesser injury and then pitched through it a couple times and now has a grade 2 hamstring strain. So just not great. Like, it's May. Just take him out. Don't pitch him. Get the MRI and get it figured out. I'm assuming you're on the same page with me there.
100%. And the most infuriating thing about this is during that Seattle series, he sat out. And we were wondering, why is Pedro Strop not going into a high leverage situation? Now it makes sense. They were resting him. So the reason I'm upset about this is because they knew of the issue. They knew they intentionally did not allow Pedro to pitch for 2 games because of that. So to allow him to go back out to have the same hamstring injury that popped up last September that basically sidelined him for the most crucial part of his season, that's unacceptable. And look, we're no doctors. I'm not saying this is even the right way to go about it. It's just disappointing knowing that the Cubs knew this was problematic for Strop. So they have a history of letting guys play out these issues. We've seen that with several players. Ben Zobrist had a wrist injury in 2017. They let him play the entire month of May with that. Jason Hayward had a wrist injury in 2016. They let him play the entire second half with that. Brandon Morrow, Darvish, both delayed bone bruises in their elbow that they couldn't figure out for many weeks. And with David Bodie recently breaking his toe, this is the first we heard of that. Apparently he's been playing with a broken toe for about a month. I don't understand the logic with that. I'm generally a hyper paranoid fan when it comes to injuries anyway. I know me. But you got to admit, Corey, that's bizarre, especially knowing the Cubs bullpen is already sensitive to begin with. Why are they taking these chances,
I don't get it. And I think some of it sometimes you can certainly write off as they're professional athletes. Who knows how much they're disclosing and when they're disclosing it.
But just get the MRI.
Yeah, absolutely. But
get the MRI.
What I was going to say is that Strop is one that they should be hypersensitive to. He just had this injury.
Right.
Other guys, maybe we give them the benefit of the doubt. You watch the NHL playoffs, for example, and you find out that guys are playing with broken hands that they just don't tell anybody about, right? But Strop is a guy where it's he just hurt this. Then he hurt the other one in spring training. This has to be something where it's you felt some discomfort, full stop. Let's get the MRI and make sure that this is not a problem. And, again, now he's going to be out for probably at least a month or a few weeks, whatever it is. So that's great, right? Great. Anyway, kind of interrupted that, but that was the loss. Now we can just burn through these wins here. And it was, like I said, the walk-off party at Wrigley Field. A lot of walk-offs if you go back to just the start of 2015. It's been a lot of fun at Wrigley Field in the last few years. And on Tuesday, it was one Christopher Lee Bryant playing the hero. But to go through the rest of this game, the Cubs getting their runs. In this one, a Javi Baez sac fly in the first. The Marlins would take a 2-1 lead in the top of the third. In the bottom of the third, Albert Almora with his second home run of the year. And then we do not see any more scoring until, again, Kris Bryant hits a 3-run walk-off home run to win this one. That was a lot of fun. The smile from KB rounding the bases was infectious. And we get 2 nights in a row with the Gatorade celebrations. And I know, Brendan, that you were watching particularly the one with Bryant, thinking it's like 30 degrees in Chicago. He's going to get hypothermia with them pouring all this Gatorade on him. I was concerned for you. I knew that was going to be a point of concern for you. But a lot of fun, and you can tell, and I saw some people pointing this out, like you can tell, especially with these two guys, Bryant and Hayward, like that the rest of the team is so excited for these guys to have these big moments. The way that they wait for him at the plate, Bryant said that, they were giving him some really good punches, but that they felt really good because they had just won the game. So it's always just fun to see this team coming together and having those fun moments. I did not give Cole Hamels' line on Monday, so I'm going to do that before I go into a certain someone's line on Tuesday. Hamels went 6. He gave up 5 hits, 3 earned, 2 walks, and 7 strikeouts. I thought it was another really good start for Cole Hamels. Yeah. He's been very good for the Chicago Cubs, a 3.38 ERA now on the season. So he's been very good. And also in that game on Monday, we did see the return of one Carl Edwards Jr., who has been great since he came back. He's been in 2 games, no walks in either of them. He has been very good so far. He looks calmer. He is getting that elevated fastball for whiffs, and it looks good. So, we obviously are glad to have him back and hope that he is able to build on what was a successful stint in the minors since he was sent down. But the line for the starting pitcher on Tuesday, that would be your boy, number 34, the lefty, the veteran, Jon Lester. He goes 6 innings, 8 hits, 2 runs, none earned, no walks, and 6 strikeouts. And this was admittedly, I don't think his best start. His command wasn't as great. His fastball command in particular was not as fine as we have seen. I think especially to righties, I noticed it tailing away from them and out of the zone, so he wasn't necessarily on that edge as fine as we have seen him. But if there's anybody that I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to when the wind was blowing in for most of this game, go ahead and hit it, Miami, and if you can get it out, you can get it out, but I don't think you're going to be able to. I'm going to give that benefit of the doubt to Jon Lester, surprise of the year on that. But we'll come back to him.
Of course.
We're not done with John, but I don't want to interrupt the recap again. So on Wednesday, the Cubs looking to at least secure a tie and stave off losing a series for the first time since that Brewers series that we mentioned several times. And this was Jason Hayward's turn to play the hero. The Cubs winning this one by a final of 3-2. The Marlins got on the board first in the top of the first inning with a Starlin Castro single. In the bottom of the fourth, the Cubs taking the lead, a Javi Baez single and a passed ball to score Anthony Rizzo, put the Cubs up 2-1. In the top of the ninth, the Marlins would spoil yet another Cubs win late, tying this one on a Miguel Rojas groundout. That made it 2-2. We would go all the way to the bottom of the 11th, where again, Jason Hayward plays hero, his second career walk-off home run, and this one an oppo shot to left field. Another feel-good one, folks. We've talked about a lot that Jason Hayward is just one of those guys who he hasn't pouted, he hasn't, been angry or anything like that with the media, the fans, or anything during the portions of his time with the Cubs that he has struggled. And in 2019, he has been very good and a much better player on offense, and it's awesome to see him get these moments and to be able to have those instances where he plays the hero and he is the person that everyone is waiting for at home plate. We've seen him, kind of constantly. Len even made reference to this on the post-game interview, that Jason's kind of thing is to always deflect to his teammates, even when he's the one responsible for success. And Len started the interview by saying, like, Jason, I know you're one to kind of pump up your teammates instead, but you kind of gotta take credit for this one. We're gonna kind of force you to take credit for this one. So it's always cool to see guys like that succeed in those moments and be able to play the hero.
You got to say what Jason Hayward said, though. I mean, that was almost too good.
It's explicit, but his response to Len was better late than never. S-word. This is a family-friendly podcast. Normally I would just rip into that, but we do like to keep it family-friendly. But I think he said that particular word 3 times in that interview. So you can tell that Jason
I only heard it once, so I must have missed that.
It was once or twice. I'm pretty sure it got in there multiple times.
Jason,
I think the later ones came after he had been doused by, I believe, 3 separate Gatorade containers. He got the first 2, thought he was in the clear, and Rizzo, with the biggest, like, childlike grin on his face, was standing just out of view of the camera, waiting, I guess, for him to put the headset back on, and then he jumped in there. But there was a really good photo. It was either Stephen Green, who I mentioned last time as the Cubs official photographer, or Brian Casella of the Chicago Tribune. You should follow both of them on Instagram especially. They both take wonderful pictures. It was one of the two of them had a photo of Hayward doing the interview with Rizzo off to the side with like a kid on Christmas grin across his face as he was just waiting to dump this bucket of, I think, ice water on Jason Hayward. Love it. Love the way these guys interact with one another. But the starter on Wednesday night was one Kyle Hendricks, who followed up his complete game shutout with Brendan. He only went 8 innings and threw 96 pitches. Like, come on, dude. Like, after you throw
way too much.
Yeah, after you throw an 81-game, complete game shutout, like, seriously, Kyle, 96 pitches, and you could only get through 8? Wow. Come on, man. Jokes aside, you never know when people are going to take that seriously. Sarcasm is hard, even in podcasts. But jokes aside, this was another really great start for Hendricks. Certainly a lot of debate in the Cubs sphere about taking Kyle Hendricks out of this game. I was not a fan. I don't think Brendan was a fan either. Joe wanted to pinch hit to, get an extra, try to get an insurance run, which, part of me doesn't blame him, just given how this series had already gone to this point. But at the same time, Hendricks was cruising. He only gave, 8 innings, 5 hits, 1 run, no earned runs, the lone run coming on his own error, and 7 strikeouts. Like, just let him go, man. Like, especially with the state of the bullpen, like, you don't have Strop. Cishek is pitching literally every day. He gets the blown save in this one. I would have let him go, but whatever. They won the game on a walk-off home run. I'm not going to lament Joe's bullpen management, at least at this current moment. But again, first time since 1998 that the Cubs walk off 2 consecutive games, and I got to tell you, folks, like, I'm not the biggest fan of playing close games with the Miami Marlins, but walk-offs are a lot of fun, so it's kind of like, you got to pick a side. Like, I don't want to be almost losing games to the Marlins, but I love watching walk-off home runs and the guys celebrate at home and throwing Gatorade all over each other. So, it is what it is. But Carl Edwards actually picking up the win in Wednesday night's game. Yeah. Again, he had another good outing to close that one out. He goes a clean inning with 2 strikeouts. So he looks good. And I think at the very least, these couple outings should be ones for him to build on, where it reminds him, like, dude, your stuff is good enough that if you just go at these guys, you're going to have a lot of success. Like, the control, we'll see if it pops up again. Probably one of those things that he's never able to combat completely or just eliminate the problem. But you got to just try to rein it in, which unfortunately is a really good segue into Thursday's game. The Cubs win, but it was another Darvish start, folks, and he goes 4 innings. He allows just 1 hit, 1 earned run, 6 walks, and 7 strikeouts. If that is not a carbon copy, if Tyler Chatwood didn't do that exact line at some point in 2018, I would be shocked, because that's what it reads like. He doesn't get hit, but he can't find the strike zone. And, again, kind of like last time, I don't really have any special insight on this. This is kind of just what he does at this point. It was the same thing we've seen before where he doesn't have the fastball command. He abandons it and, is throwing those breaking balls, especially the slider, to try and get over the plate. I don't know, folks, but this may be a vision of things to come as Mike Montgomery, who we mentioned before, is back with the team. He comes in, and if you flipped them around, I could probably convince you that Mike Montgomery started this game, because Mike Montgomery goes 5 innings, 3 hits, no earned runs, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts, and he gets the win in this one. So if you didn't watch the game, you could probably be pretty easily convinced that Mike Montgomery had started this game. Alas, he did not, but I would not be surprised to see a similar piggyback like this going forward. And the Cubs getting their runs in this one. Kris Bryant, you may have heard of him. He hits his 7th home run of the year in the first inning. That made it 1-0, and Albert Almora Jr. single made it 2-0. The Marlins would get one in the 4th on a Rosell Herrera single. And then in the bottom of the 5th, Tony would give us a couple of insurance runs, a 2-run home run. That is Anthony's 10th of the season. Anthony Rizzo recently, as we mentioned, hit his 200th career home run. This, on Thursday, was the 200th as a Chicago Cub. So obviously a nice moment for him, and always cool to see those guys get those accomplishments in a Chicago Cubs uniform. Anthony Rizzo is a true Chicago Cub and will be forever. And it's cool when they get milestones like this, especially when they come at Wrigley Field and come in moments. This was a big insurance run, home run that the team, I think, felt very comfortable getting. Gave them a 4-1 lead that they finished the game off with. Again, Mike Montgomery getting the win. And that is pretty much the lay of the land here. So the first thing that I would like to talk about, Brendan, is Bryzzo. I think that that's naturally where we need to go. And I'm looking at an article from friend of the podcast, Jordan Bastian. He was on with us for an interview in spring training. And from his article on MLB.com, he noted that back on April 17th, Anthony Rizzo was batting .159 with a .629 OPS, and Kris Bryant was hitting .219 with a .668 OPS. Jordan says, quote, "The duo has heated up in unison over the past 3 weeks. In the time since their respective slow starts, so again, since April 17th, Bryant and Rizzo have hit a combined .320 with a .450 on-base percentage and a .750 slugging percentage with 13 home runs, 12 doubles, 37 RBIs, and 25 walks to 19 strikeouts in 162 combined plate appearances."
Ooh, boy.
Bryant now has a .918 OPS on the season, and Rizzo has a .937 OPS on the season. Again, that up from .629 and .668, respectively. So we have often talked that getting these guys going at the same time is obviously and has been a lethal combination for this team. But especially with their slow start, almost nothing that has happened with this team. I think even like Javi looking again like the 2018 version of himself, Wilson looking like the version of himself that we all wanted. Those are all immensely important and not to be tossed aside, right? But it's tough for me to think that there is anything more crucial to the success of this team than Bryzzo performing as top of the league talents, and both of their numbers have gotten right back up there, Brendan.
Well, we said it too. Like even 3 weeks ago, we said, wait until Bryzzo clicks, because we saw Baez doing well, we saw Contreras picking up the slack, and in the back of our minds, we always imagine, what if Bryzzo comes back and Javi and Wilson keep doing their thing? Well, we're seeing it. They just won 10 of 11 games. They have the best offense right now in the National League. And I was looking at just those 4 guys in particular. So Bryant, Rizzo, Javi, Contreras. And I wanted to see how they're comparing to the rest of Major League Baseball in terms of their kind of their expected numbers. And all 4 of those guys, Corey, they have expected slugging rates better than 90% of major league hitters. Okay? Those are your 2, 3, 4, 5
Talk
hitters.
dirty to me, Brendan.
I mean, come on, Corey. So, first off, was there ever a doubt that Kris Bryant would return to this level? Second
Not
off,
on this podcast.
Not on this podcast. Second off, was there ever a doubt Rizzo would return to this level?
Also not on this podcast.
Not on this podcast. So as it stands now, you just read off those incredible numbers. But just to add to that, I almost had to refresh my Fangraphs page because I thought it was wrong. Rizzo has 10 homers. Bryant has 7 homers. Both those guys have WOBAs around 390. Rizzo is on pace for over 40 homers. And we know, we've mentioned it many times, he's always around, 31, 32 homers every single year. Maybe this is finally the year.
I think it is.
You think so? Okay.
He wants it.
He wants it, man. But he did this in 2016.
32 is the number, by the way. He's
32 is the number.
3 times?
Yeah. But like in 2016, he was on pace for it. Like, I'm still surprised he never got to it. But anyway, he's on pace for over 40 homers. So, you can be excited about that, whatever. I was shocked to even see, he's doing well, but to see those numbers in front of you, to see them normalize so fast, this sport is nuts. Like, I can't believe we're sitting here, which seems like 3 weeks ago, the tone was completely different around this team. We're 22-13. We're the best team in the National League, in my opinion. Our pitching staff continues to go out there and just throw strikes, strike people out, sans Darvish. This is awesome, Corey. I think getting Bryzzo back has really catapulted this team, and we knew this would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We warned, I think anyone listening to us probably was not necessarily in that group super worried about either of these guys, as I would hope that we've conditioned you not to. And we pleaded with you to believe in Kris Bryant through the offseason and trust that he was healthy and that it was going to happen. But it's pretty difficult not to get, honestly, carried away with some of these numbers, especially when I'm looking at Kris Bryant, because, and I mentioned this, I think, on the last podcast, but right now he's doing something that is special, and I think only because of the slow start, it's taking people a little longer to pay attention to it. But his walk rate would be the best of his career. His K rate would be the best of his career. His WRC Plus is at 145 right now, coming out of this Marlins series, updated to the minute that I am talking. When he won the MVP, it was 148. In 2017, it was 146, so very near the best of his career. He's got a 390 WOBA, which is the same thing. In 2017, it was 399, and 2016, when he won the MVP, it was 396. 2015, just for reference, it was 371. So he's putting up numbers that are threatening the best numbers of his career. And for as much as we saw those very silly comparisons of this guy has more homers than Anthony Rizzo and Kris Bryant combined, through 2 weeks of the season, right? Which, I got to be honest with you, got a lot of people blocked on my timeline. There's certain things I don't tolerate.
What's your number at right now?
Kris Bryant slander is one of those things. But KB's up to 7. He's heating up real quick. Anthony Rizzo's up to 10. These guys aren't messing around.
That's a sneaky 10, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a sneaky 10.
I don't think it can be overstated that Kris Bryant is literally in the process of potentially putting up the best season that we have seen from him.
Yep.
That's absurd. When we kept saying, railing, there's a reason that we were railing on this point. From 2015 to 2018, there are, I think, 3 players that had accumulated more wins above replacement than Kris Bryant. And I believe those players are Mike Trout, Jose Altuve, and Mookie Betts. Yeah. So it's not hyperbole when we say that he's one of the best players in the league. That's not a joke. That's not something we just say because we love him. It's factually backed up. And to see him, especially after the slow start, be putting up numbers that are this good and, again, threatening career bests, look out, man. I mean, his approach right now is so locked in.
How do you get this guy out?
He is his eye at the plate is incredible right now. He's pulling the ball for home runs. He's going oppo when he has the opportunity to. He's putting balls on Waveland. He's hitting walk-off home runs. Guys, I'm telling you, we warned you. Like, we need like a siren noise here or something like that, Brendan. But like, it's happening. Like, KB is back, and he is gunning for a second MVP. Like, this is not a joke. This is very serious. What's happening here? This is like that Michael Scott gif from The Office where he says, "Oh my God, it's happening," and everybody's rushing to the door because the fire alarm is going off. Like that is what's happening here. Like, it is happening. Kris Bryant is back, and he is back with a vengeance, folks.
Corey, you saw where that pitch was when Bryant walked off, right? 99 miles per hour up on his hands, which, by the way, he hit his spot. The pitcher hit his spot. The catcher was sitting up there, right there. That was the scouting report against Bryant. It's been that way the entire first portion of this season. And we wrote about this on CubsInsider.com. But Bryant's been struggling a lot against that very pitch. And so for him to take a upper 90s fastball that would have basically hit his knuckles and pull it with authority on a cold Wrigley Field night for a walk-off home run is an insane sign. So you can look at the walk rate, look at the strikeout rate, both of which, as you were just saying, career best right now, almost in line with what Rizzo does on a yearly basis. But for me, seeing him hit that home run on a pitch in on his hands is the most telling sign of what's to come. Because if he keeps doing this, if he keeps rapidly adjusting to pitchers, there is no way to get this guy out. He's walking more, he's striking out less, and the way pitchers attacked Bryant was up and in with fastballs. If Bryant's going to start hitting those, how do you get this man out? You're not going to. That's absurd, Corey, that Bryant keeps adjusting this much. And we talked about it in years past too. And it's fun just to update the tally mark. But when Bryant was brought up in 2015, his contact rate was 68%. Okay? Actually, I take that back. 66%. The league average that year was 79%. Okay? 2016, contact up to 73%. 2017, up to 77%. Last year before he was injured, 75%. This year, as it is right now, 78%. He is 2% better than league average in the contact rate category. When this guy was called up, that was his biggest hole, was his strikeout rate. He's fixed that. Now he's walking more. He's combating high and in fastballs. He is one of the smartest hitters, Corey, I think I've seen in a Cubs uniform. He keeps adjusting so fast. There's going to come a point where you can't get this guy out, and that's going to translate to more MVP numbers. He's a 390 WOBA right now, but if he keeps doing this, that's going to go up to like 420, 430. There's no way to get this guy out right now.
Sign me up for that.
Let's
and
go.
Another note, again, from Jordan Bastian at ML Bastion on Twitter, a great follow and a great addition to the Cubs beat already this year. He notes that Bryant's home run, the walk-off, came on a 98.7 mile per hour pitch. Only two faster pitches had been hit for home runs across the entire MLB this season, and it's the second fastest pitch that Bryant has hit for a homer.
And again, that was not a mistake.
Career.
That pitch was not a mistake. The catch, he hit his spot, Corey. If you look at the actual heat map, it's like pinging right in on his hands. He hit his spot. That's what's so impressive about it. So forget all these other numbers, which you shouldn't, but if you're going to, and if you want to look at one example, that's it right there. And just one other note before you move on here, but he did change his bat. I don't know if you saw that, Corey, but Sahadev of The Athletic wrote about this. And Bryant's using this like axe bat, which is basically, how do I describe this? The handle of the bat where the knob usually is shaped like an axe. Like, it doesn't have a circular round knob. It's like an axe. So since he's been doing that, he's been doing like nothing but hitting home runs. I think he hit his, fifth homer or fourth homer since switching to that bat back in Arizona. So maybe that's part of it, whatever is going on here. But just sign me up. Just keep doing what you're doing here. Keep walking, keep striking out less, keep hitting homers, keep pounding the ball oppo, pulling it in cold weather. This is en route to an MVP year, Corey.
Sign me up for that. And he also gives us, similar to, I think it was in that last series where he said it was, super fun, the baseball that they were playing. And I love that quote so much. He follows up with another great one after the walk-off. And he says, quote, "Who wants to come sit through a 3.5-hour baseball game when it's 35 degrees out? Cubs fans. That's who. You're goddamn right, Kris. You are right that we do, okay? And there's nothing better than Kris Bryant, like, pumping up Cubs fans. I read that and I was like, oh yeah, like, let's go, man. But I just one more note on Rizzo, since I was doing that comparison with Kris Bryant. He's got a 147 WRC plus. Again, we mention this all the time. 100 is league average. That would be the second highest mark of Anthony Rizzo's career. 155 is his current high for the 2014 Chicago Cubs. And his 392 WOBA would be also the second highest of his career. 2014 was at 397. So, again, we're still in, what is it now, close to mid-May. The first third of May is almost over. Plenty of season left, but it has not warmed up in Chicago, which is typically when we see hitters start to be able to drive the ball a little better. And, as the weather heats up, so do the bats, so to speak. But even right now, especially given their starts. I mean, both of their OPSs were in the 600s on April 17th, like I read from that stat from Jordan Bastian. And for them both right now to be on pace for close to or possibly their best seasons of Major League Baseball, look out, everybody. I mean, this is not a joke. When I went on that hype speech before opening day saying, like, these are Theo Epstein's Chicago Cubs, they, since 2015, are the best team in baseball. Like, this is one of the reasons why. And when you start to get potentially all-time seasons from Bryzzo, right, to go along with the, MVP level potential in Javi Baez, Wilson Contreras destroying the ball, Jason Hayward having an offensive, we can call it a resurgence. I don't know what word you want to use there. I'll choose my word there carefully.
Yeah,
but
tread carefully, yeah.
Either way, like, that's got to get you excited, because it's got me excited, and I know it's got Brendan excited. So,
yeah, and great job by Anthony Iapoce. I don't know what he's doing over there, but there's got to be credit given out to someone, and
sure,
you can put it on the players. I'm sure they're of course working extremely hard, but Iapoce's doing a great job. You can only look at the results, and I mean, come on, the power's back for everyone, so you got to put it on someone. It has to be Iapoce. Yeah,
absolutely. So I do want to transition now, and you'll have to stop me if you're surprised that this is the direction that I want to go. But I do want to talk about a particular pitcher, and I'm gonna give away. So, spoiler alert: in the beginning, I said that a certain pitcher, if he were qualified, would be the MLB's ERA leader. Here's the reveal. Guess who? It's Jon Lester. Everybody. This is one of those things, Brendan, where when I'm looking at this, I almost don't even know what to do with it, because I think that everybody who's listened to this podcast might hear me say something like that and think I'm describing like a dream that I had where Jon Lester is Major League Baseball's ERA leader. But this is literally what's happening, folks. And so here's the deal. You need 1 inning pitched for every game that your team has played. So as of today now, the Cubs are at 35 games. Jon Lester is at 32 innings pitched. So probably in his next start, he'll qualify at the very least. In a couple starts, it'll, start to get there, right? But basically, he's 3 innings off at the moment. When he pitched the other night, he was an inning off. It was 32 innings in the Cubs' 33rd game. But that's, getting pretty pedantic, right? You're getting pretty fine-grained in terms of how you're defining these things. It's not like he's thrown 1 start, right, and has this number. He's thrown 32 innings. He started 6 games. His ERA is 1.41. Folks, that is a real number in almost any sense except for this, exact definition of qualifying. Jon Lester is not the Cubs' ERA leader. He is not the NL Central ERA leader. He is not the National League ERA leader. He is Major League Baseball's ERA leader. Guys, I've said it a million times. Don't doubt Jon Lester. I laughed. I yelled at people in spring training for talking about how bad his spring training was. And anybody that mentions, the back end of his contract and things like that, we won't have it here. Just like Kris Bryant slander, just like Pedro Strop slander. Okay? Jon Lester slander not tolerated on the Cubs-related podcast. And not only is he living up to the contract, which we've said a million times, he's been worth light years ahead of what the Cubs paid him. Somehow he's underpaid by the Chicago Cubs. But he is in this season, and he's got the best ERA in Major League Baseball. Brendan, it is almost too on brand for me to even be able to discuss this because it's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing it through command. Like, he's not walking anyone. So that's where the results come in for the majority of the pitching staff right now, is like their command is exceptional. And even for Cole Hamels, he's had some of those starts where he's walking guys. But in my opinion, watching those games, he's still showing command. He's throwing where he wants to throw these pitches, and they're off a little bit. But back to Lester, yeah, he has a 1.4 ERA, whatever it is right now. That's insane to even conceptualize at this point, given his age, given the perception around him with that age. I don't know if I think you're with me. I don't know if you want to expect a 1.4 ERA going forward. No, yeah, and it's not the point. And some of your advanced, whatever you want to call it, these dumb stats suggest he is getting a little fortunate. But personally, I don't really care. I think right now, early on in the year, there's so much variability. It's hard to get lost in those stats. Mm-hmm. It really is. If you watch the games Lester's pitching, you look for a few things to know that he's on. For me, the number one thing I look for is that backdoor cutter to righties. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Is when the pitcher, or rather the catcher, sets up right outside on the black, on the outside portion when righties are up, and Lester pinpoints those cutters. He's been doing that with, I think, more frequency this year. And there's been a few guys on Twitter, like Aaron Kennelly in particular, who's shown Lester's changing up his location of where he's throwing his four-seamers. So he's adapting to the league. And you're not going to get the same whiff rates in the past. You're not going to get the same velocity that you're accustomed to seeing from Lester. But that's okay. He can survive off of what he's doing now. And he's an extremely intellectual pitcher. He's willing to adapt. He's willing to listen. He's going to be okay. And so I keep saying this, but I'm gonna keep saying it because I think it's so true. When Theo introduced this man, this future Chicago Cubs legend, Jon Lester, he compared him to Andy Pettitte. And even those computers who try to find historical projections, he's been compared to like Tom Glavine. So he's being compared to aging lefty pitchers that have been highly successful in their late 30s. So to expect Lester to have a 1.4 ERA is not realistic. But on the other hand, to not expect him to be good is also unrealistic. So it's crazy to go out there and see some of these takes. If the playoffs were to start tomorrow, I would have no issue throwing out Johnny in your top 2 or top 3. You have that faith in him. You have that faith that he's going to go out there and give you that command.
Top 2 or top 3? What?
Okay, maybe.
Jon Lester's game 1, no question.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I would throw Hendricks right. Look, you can debate this.
I'm not having it.
I know you're not having this, but regardless, you can make the argument he can be the number 1. Sure, go for it. But that's where I'm coming at. Is like, yeah, he's aging. Yeah, his fastball velocity's down. Yeah, he's not getting the whiffs he used to. But he's changing his scouting reports. He's adapting to the league, and he's going to be fine, and he's going to continue to get outs. Again, maybe not to this serious degree of a 1.4 ERA, but at the end of the year, we could be talking about how, oh my God, there's another pitcher who is beating his peripherals just like Kyle Hendricks does every year, and that's Jon Lester, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to Rizzo and Bryant, some of these numbers are at rates that we haven't seen in a while. His K per 9 right now, 9.28, would be the highest looking at his Fangraph page since 2010 with the Boston Red Sox, and his 1.97 walk per 9 would be the highest or lowest, best, however you want to say that, with the Chicago Cubs, and his best since the exact same number in 2014 with the Red Sox and then the Oakland A's. So, and those are things where, again, like even if he's a guy who outperforms his FIP, whatever, like if he's striking people out at a rate like that and he's not walking guys, he's going to be successful.
Right.
So, as you said, Brendan, I am definitely not holding him to a 1.41 ERA. I don't think that's really reasonable, but he's just been so good. And even if, you just look at like he's given you a month plus of this in the back end of this contract in his 5th year with the Chicago Cubs after being miles worth his contract during the first portion of his time with the Chicago Cubs. So it's amazing, man. Like there is a legitimate reason that I, fell in love with him and talk about him the way that I do. And it's because he's really freaking good. And he just goes out there and gets the job done. And he's also a bit of a clown. And I say that because his post-game comments are just unbelievable, as he's done in the past. He goes up there in the press conference. He's messing around with Schwarber, who lost a ball in the wind that leads to a run. And then he's messing around with Rizzo, who on a, kind of like bleeder to first, he was yelling at Rizzo. He was saying that it was going to go foul, grab it, and then Rizzo has to do the splits to touch the base. It was a funny looking play. But then Lester's like in the press conference, kind of razzing both of them. And he did finish the Kyle Schwarber note where he said like, like everything was good except for Kyle Schwarber, doing circles out there trying to catch fly balls. And he did finish with saying like, Schwarber said that to me, so I'm allowed to say that. Like obviously he's not up there like actually ripping on these guys. But I love him as a pitcher. I love him as a player, and his sense of humor, it never ceases to make me laugh and make me smile. So
do you dislike anything about Jon Lester?
I mean, I don't wear camo myself, so as I'm looking at this press conference, he was wearing a camo.
But
sweater.
You love that Jon Lester wears camo, though. You love that about him.
It's on brand for him. Yes, I appreciate his commitment to who he is and his brand. I'm just saying, like, there's no camo in my closet, so we don't exactly align there. But hey, be yourself, right? So I love how Jon Lester he is, right? That's kind of the thing when he says the stuff, making fun of advanced stats, things like that. Like he's always very Jon Lester in everything he does and says, and obviously I love all of it. So I think that, as far as this series is concerned, those are kind of my predominant takeaways, Brendan. I didn't throw this out there in the recaps, but just to, paint this picture again, the Cubs have not lost a series in their last 9 attempts. That's pretty absurd, Brendan. That is a really good stretch of baseball. And again, I've been updating this as we've been going here. I hope I have to keep updating it, right? Like, and they just don't lose series anymore. But that was after the Brewers series. So they lose, the Rangers series, the Braves series, and the Brewers series. And then they start with the Pirates, and they just go on a tear from there. And to be able to, the kind of old adage is always like, 2 out of 3, that type of win percentage obviously puts you in a good place at the end of the year. And that's, kind of something that you focus on when looking at these series. But to not lose one in their last 9 is super impressive. And again, I am going to choose to operate
You've been listening to a lot of
that
Kris
had
Bryant
they.
there.
Yeah, right. Right. Super is the new word of the day on the Cubs-related podcast, thanks to Kris. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to choose to believe that had they played that Sunday game and it had not gotten, I think it got snowed out maybe, against the Angels, I'm just going to choose to believe that they were going to win that too. So it would have been 9 in a row, I think. And again, just to run through it, they win a series with Pittsburgh. They split with the Anaheim Angels in Chicago. Again, the Sunday game weathered out. They sweep the Miami Marlins. They take 2 of 3 from the Arizona Diamondbacks, 2 of 3 from the Los Angeles Dodgers, 2 of 3 again from the Arizona Diamondbacks. They sweep a 2-game set in Seattle with a Mariners team that had been playing well coming into that series. They sweep the boring St. Louis Cardinals out of Wrigley Field, and on Sunday it was on national TV on ESPN. And they just get through taking 3 of 4 with the Miami Marlins. There's not much that you can say about how well this team has been playing and how impressive of a job they have done. And we've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Erasing that 1-6, 2-7 start. Like, they're 19-5 in their last 24 games. This team is rolling. As we mentioned, Bryzzo and their heating up is certainly at the heart of it. But you look at this, the way that this team is playing, the 2 through 5 on most days of Kris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Javi Baez, and Wilson Contreras. And it's difficult to not get a little carried away with your expectations for this team, which is, not easy to kind of rein that all in. But I do just want to point out there's probably some people that create some projection systems. Pacoda, excuse me. Sorry for coughing there on the broadcast. But Brendan, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm honestly not expecting the Cubs to go 57-70, so I think that their 79-win projection is going to be just a touch off. I think the Cubs, with the way they're playing right now, should be scaring them into thinking they're going to be a considerable amount off on that projection, like in the teens, maybe closer to 20 games off on that, which you'll have to correct me on this. You're the stats guy here. I don't think that was in their margin of error. I don't think like 15 to 20 wins off was in their model's margin of error. But I am comfortable saying, Brendan, that I'm pretty sure they're going to win more than 79 games, which you'll recall I scoffed at, like quite literally on this podcast.
Can we talk about that for a second? The Pacoda thing. Here's the thing. With Pacoda, the most annoying part about that was the individual who was responsible for handling Pacoda, like, vehemently backed the model. And that's fine. You can back a model, but the argument to back the model was, well, this is baseball. You can't predict baseball. We know our margin of error. That doesn't mean your model is good. And if you I make this joke a lot, but if you were to develop that model for Google and trying to predict teams and wins, you're going to lose your job, dude. Like, the margin of error, the variance for those projections are always like plus or minus 6 wins. And at the extreme level, they're plus or minus 12 to 15 wins. And so you're really not predicting baseball. At that point, you're not predicting anything. You're giving like a really rough estimate of what you think could happen. So your model like sucks. Like, I mean, it's one of the better models because every model sucks, because baseball, you can't predict baseball. It's just how it is. So that's it's just such a pet peeve of mine. And you look at those Pacoda projections, the one pitcher who was at the top of the leaderboard for the Cubs was Yu Darvish. At the bottom of the leaderboard was John Lester. Well, the roles have reversed. In reality, John Lester is the best NL ERA or Major League Baseball ERA leader in the league right now, whereas Darvish is looking like Tyler Chatwis. You can't predict this sport. It's a fluky sport. It is what it is. And I think that kind of like segues into Darvish. Just want to mention it. I don't want to go into great detail about it because we know we've belabored this point. Fastball command was not good. The only reason I mentioned Darvish here is because Joe Madden talked about it after the game, and he suggested that Darvish's issues are mental in nature and not mechanical. I don't know what to think of that. They said the same thing about Chatwood last year, but Chatwood came back after the offseason with a clear mechanical shift, and it's worked so far. So I guess what I'm coming at here is it's discouraging because they have no idea what's going on with Darvish. And to go and suggest, yeah, it's probably mental, when in recent memory, a different pitcher, he said the same thing, but he comes back and it's mechanical. It's very disconcerting for me, Corey, not to bring down the party over here because there's been so much positivity, but it is annoying seeing Darvish do this. Our expectations for Darvish is that of a top pitcher in the league. I mean, Theo always said he's the premier strikeout pitcher of a generation. So to see him do this, for me, it's so discouraging because you want Darvish to go out there and shove and prove all those haters wrong and for him to have his moment. And unfortunately, we're not there. And I got to say, there's got to come a point where you really question whether he should be in the rotation. I'm being dead serious here. You can't go out there and walk on average 7 guys per 9 innings. Cannot be doing that. Can't rely on Mike Montgomery every single time to piggyback off you and go 5-6 innings to cover for you. It's not a realistic option, especially with this bullpen right now and having its health issues. I don't know, Corey. The Darvish thing is so bizarre to me because his stuff looks good. His slider looks good. He's throwing 98, 99. It's like, what is going on here? Why can this guy not throw a strike? And so I hope he figures it out, but I got to say my confidence in him to do so, at least in the immediate future, is pretty low. I think long term, I would be surprised if Darvish is not valuable for this team, but I think in the immediate next month or two, I don't know if you can expect much out of him.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and I know what you mean, about like him in the rotation and all that, and it's just one of those things where obviously, given the potential that he has, the expectations for him, and the contract does play into it, whether we want it to be that way or not, it's going to be tough for them to make that decision. And, I don't know that it's at that point just yet, but this was a disappointing one, man.
I mean, at what point do we talk about it seriously then?
No, right. That's the question. I don't know. But this is a disappointing one because, in contrast to Saturday, when he pitches against the Cardinals, I said that I was obviously really upset that, and you guys know this about me, that he walks the first 2 guys in the half of the inning right after Taylor Davis hits a game-tying grand slam, gets him back in the game. So that's obviously frustrating, and, that performance is what it is against a very good St. Louis Cardinals offense. Thursday, though, is where you start to get a little concerned because this, no offense to the Marlins or any of their fans that may be listening, but this offense sucks, Brendan. And that's not really a term I don't think we use very often on this podcast, but it's really the only way to describe this team. And just to give context to that, let me read through the OPSs after Thursday's game of this Marlins lineup that Yu Darvish faced. 605, 662, 641, 829, which is Neil Walker, who is one of those guys who I'm sure his lifetime average against the Cubs is 100 points higher than it is against the rest of the league. But he's the outlier here. 580, 517, 700, 508, and then the pitcher came in with 237. And you walked 6 guys in 4 innings.
Yeah,
he throws 97 pitches in 4 innings. Like, if this isn't a lineup that you can't go out there and throw, and if they hit you, they hit you, I don't really know who you're going to be able to succeed against. And the most, perhaps the most concerning trend is that, not that really any portion of this lineup is any good, but this is not the first game, Brendan, where we have seen him not be able to throw strikes to the bottom of people's lineup. And when you are walking the bottom of the Miami Marlins lineup, you kind of have to take notice on that and say, this is a potential problem. I mean, he walked Trevor Richards, the starting pitcher, in this game. It's just not something that should be happening, and it's so frustrating because he has such good stuff. His fastball velocity has been great the entire year. His slider has crazy movement. I think he strikes Neil Walker out on this game. I think Len called it a cutter. I don't have it in front of me. But it was a perfectly placed pitch where Walker couldn't do anything with it, but he got convinced to swing at it, and then it broke just a little in and off the plate down. So the stuff is there, but this inability to throw strikes, this abandoning seemingly every game of whatever the game plan is and, trying to use the fastball for strikes and then turning into just this off-speed machine. It's tough, man. And
you have to ask
I don't
yourself the question too. When you do that, when you throw 60% sliders, what is the injury effect of that? Not to say he's going to injure doing that, but there's a reason why pitchers who throw sliders and cutters over 50% of the time get injured. Looking at you, Tyson Ross. Looking at you, Chris Archer.
Right.
So there's two effects of this. One, you don't go deep into games. Two, you potentially predispose yourself to injury, and you even delay your progress even more. So that's why I'm saying there comes a point where you got to start thinking about the health, the team, the sense of urgency. It's got to go all ways, man. If you have a pitcher out there walking 7 guys per game and you keep letting them do that, where is the urgency? And I'm not saying, put him in the bullpen right now, but I think the conversation is warranted at this point. I do. I don't see any signs where you think to yourself he could get out of it, because your manager is suggesting it's mental. Your pitching coach and your scouting report is being completely abandoned by the second inning. I don't see any area where you're like, you know what, he can pull out of this the next start. I don't see that, Corey. It's just I don't know. It is disappointing because I had such high expectations for him, and I did not see command being problematic. He's never shown this poor command ever in his entire career. I don't get what's going on here.
And I think you touched on it a little bit, but it does come down to urgency. And I think right now you're in a position where, we just gushed about John Lester. Kyle Hendricks has thrown, 17 innings now in a row of incredible, just absolutely incredible baseball. Jose Quintana has looked, probably the best he has for the Chicago Cubs in 2019. Cole Hamels has been giving you quality starts, keeping you in games, got a low 3s ERA. So right now it doesn't feel like there's that pressure for you to be productive or to be at a certain level, but that's also in the same sense not necessarily fair to those other 4 guys. Like, these are pitchers, injuries happen. I'm knocking on wood, trust me as I say that. But, and you can also even when Lester's been good on the whole for a season, we've seen him have blow-up outings, and Quintana's had blow-up outings. Hamels have had blow-up outings. So is Hendricks. So it puts, sort of this maybe unfair expectation on these other guys where it's like, if you as the 5th starter, we could probably tolerate him going out there, being as wild as can be, and, you see how far he can go every 5th day, and hopefully it gets better or, starts on a better path. And those other 4 guys are going to be, carrying the rotation. But can you count on that for the entire season? And what happens if you can't? And then Darvish is still, giving you these 90-something pitch 4-inning outings. And, you just read some of the, the amount of times that he has not gone, 5 innings plus in his Cubs career. I think they said on the broadcast that he was looking for his first win at Wrigley Field. Some of this stuff is really depressing, weird, man. And I'm glad Montgomery's back. It was a really big effort from him today to literally put together the equivalent of a start in this game to close this game down, going from the 5th inning to the final out of the game. But is that I think another friend of the podcast, Michael Cerami, tweeted this today where he's like, yeah, that's cool, but that's also kind of depressing that that's what was necessary today, is that Mike Montgomery needed to come in and throw 5 really good innings to relieve Yu Darvish. So, yeah, it's a nuanced situation. It just hasn't gone as any of us would have expected, and it's just something that we're going to have to keep checking on. But like I said, I think the last time this came up, like, this team is playing too well. He has so much potential, and if he is better, his value to this team and the way, the level that he could take this team to is extremely high. But the team's playing too well. There's just too much else going on. We've got 4 pitchers in the rotation who are just doing really good things.
You can't dwell on Darvish.
We can't really dwell on it all the time. I want to read one last Bryzzo thing before we go into the housekeeping of some of those roster moves and that we touched on at the beginning. This is from Bleacher Nation, Brett Taylor. And this is from one of the articles that he just posted on Bryzzo, and it's just a little note that I think is an awful lot of fun here. He was talking about Rizzo and Bryant having the 147 and the 145 WRC plus respectively, and he says both guys are now in the top 12 in the National League in terms of WRC plus. And I'm thinking, that's a fun little note, but Brett had a follow-up here. We're not done with the fun on this, super fun. On this particular note. In parentheses, Brett adds, but fun fact, there are 2 Cubs ahead of them on that list, and that would be Javi Baez and Wilson Contreras. Like Brendan has continued to say, this offense is and has the potential to be the best in the National League.
In Major League Baseball, Corey, not just the NL. Come on, we got to give them more credit than
that. Those are, I think, super fun is a really good way of describing those numbers. That is super fun. I am having a lot of fun reading them. But okay, let's get to some of these roster moves. Again, we talked about Mike Montgomery coming up. He obviously pitched today. He was good in the minors for the Iowa Cubs. Earns the call-up and immediately, kind of gets back to where his value has shined for this Chicago Cubs team, kind of being able to, go between short relief, long relief, spot starts, turns in the rotation, etc. He's been an extremely valuable piece for this Cubs team, and he showed that again on Thursday. You may also remember Len was careful to point this out in the broadcast on Thursday that Mike Montgomery was actually on the mound in Game 7 of the World Series in extra innings and gets the final out
to win
as
the
Cubs
Series.
Win the World Series.
Cubs win the World Series, yeah.
I do want to make sure to pass that very specific note along. Like we said, Pedro Strop on the injured list. We have already complained about the Cubs' handling of that, as I think you guys were certainly expecting. Ben Zobrist to the restricted list. I do want to touch on this for a second. We are definitely not going to speculate as to what the reason for this may be, but this is something that is noteworthy because the restricted list is not something we see used that often. And basically, the difference between the restricted list and like the injured list or the bereavement list is that the restricted list does not have that kind of short, specific timetable for how long the person has to be on it. It's sort of an indefinite leave that is kind of meant to be like, well, this person is away from baseball for a while for a variety of reasons. But when they come back, they're, still retained by the team that has them under contract.
And he's off the 40-man roster, too, which is important.
Right, it temporarily opens the spot on the 40-man roster, yes. So all I'm going to say on that, again, I'm not going to speculate as to what's going on. I really couldn't, even if I was going to try. But all I'm going to say is that it's been listed as personal reasons. So I'm going to take that at face value and say that simply I hope that everything is all right with Ben, with his family, with his personal life, whatever is going on. We heard him, that he arrived late to spring training because of personal reasons as well. I do not know if this is the same situation. I do not know if they're related. I don't know what's going on, truthfully. But all I would say is I sincerely wish the best to Ben and his family, and I hope that they are able to get through whatever this situation is, healthy, safe, whatever the situation may be, that is my main takeaway on this. And, look, we've, if you've been watching this team since he signed here, you know the value that Ben has to this team. You know what he is able to provide for this team, either as, a regular everyday player or a depth player, pinch hitter, whatever it is. Ben has come up in those roles and been everything as advertised when the Cubs signed him. So I, again, hope that everything is all right with him, that he's able to handle it, and that he's back with this team soon. We will certainly miss Ben Zobrist for however long he is not with this team. And the last move, like I mentioned in the outset of this podcast, is that the Cubs did make the decision to call up Addison Russell. He does get back into game action on Wednesday. He was met with pretty resounding boos, which, I gotta say I appreciated from the Wrigley Field crowd. As Theo said, he has to earn any other reception, and, that the crowd is in the right to react that way. Again, we have stated on here before, and I did in the beginning of this podcast, that we were disappointed that he was retained by this team and disappointed that he came back. But as I said with this situation, when the allegations first came out, when he was ultimately suspended for violating the league's domestic violence policy, this is not within my decision or Brendan's decision. This is a decision that the Cubs have made to go through this process. They have told us fans all along that their belief is that they want to be a part of the solution, that they have consulted with people who believe that this can help to be part of the solution. And my only hope, guys, is that is what happens. Again, he's back on this team. He played in a game for the Cubs. So, that is where the situation is. That is the course of action that they have taken. I sincerely hope that he has been getting the help that he needs, and that he is a better person for it, and that he can be a better boyfriend, a better father, and learn and grow from this entire experience. I think that's the only thing that I, can really offer up, other than, again, reiterating that we didn't really want him on this team and don't really now. Yeah. But that's the decision that they made, and one that we all, have to go forward with, for better or worse. So,
yeah, man, it sucks. Like you were saying, the first thing that comes to mind is you hope that Russell's family is doing better, particularly Melissa and his children. And it is a fluid situation. And like what Theo was saying, this is a conditional second chance, and it's going to be fluid. Previewing this upcoming series against the Milwaukee Brewers will be a fun one. We have great matchups. It's a 3-game set. First game starts Friday at 1:20 p.m. at beautiful Wrigley Field. Gio Gonzalez will be taking the mound for Milwaukee. He'll be facing Jose Quintana, who's been mostly good against Milwaukee, got roughed up a little bit in his most recent start against them. But Q on the year, really good. 4-1, a 3.4 ERA. Gio Gonzalez, no decisions. He's 0-0 with a 2.61 ERA. On the second game of this set, we have Zach Davies facing Cole Hamels. Both of those pitchers have yet to been tagged with a loss. Davies is 4-0 with a 1.56 ERA. Great start for Davies. Cole Hamels, as we all know, another good start. He's a 3.38 ERA. And then on Sunday, to finish off the 3-game set, we'll be under the Wrigley Field lights, another Sunday night baseball broadcast for this team at Wrigley. We have Julius Chacin, who's not doing so well compared to last year. He's 3-3 with a 5.03 ERA. He'll be facing off against your boy, Corey, John Lester, who is essentially the major league leader in ERA. Lester, of course, with that 1.41 ERA and that 2-1 run record. So the standings as we are recording this right now, Cubs sit 22-13. They are one full game up of Milwaukee. That will stay true until they play tomorrow. Milwaukee's 23-16. They've been playing a lot better recently. And just to give the complete spectrum of the NL Central, we have the Cardinals at third place. They've been going through a little bit of a rough patch here. So they're at 21-16, 2 games back of the Cubs. Behind the Cardinals is the Pirates at 17-16. 4 games back of the Cubs, and then deep in the cellar is the Cincinnati Reds, who are 16-22 with a 7.5 game back tally from the Cubs. The Cubs right now are a little back from the Dodgers from having the best record in the National League. The Dodgers are 25-14. Outside of that, the Cubs do have the best record in the National League. And as we all know, they've been playing extremely well. 10 of their last 11 games, they have won. What I'm looking for this series is how they utilize that bullpen. We don't know who's going to be closing. Madden said it's a free-for-all. And we saw Kyle Ryan get a chance. We saw Steve Cishek get a chance. But we saw Tyler Chatwood pitch in the 10th inning of that second game, or rather that third game. So who knows what's going to happen? My personal preference is just give the ball to Steve Cishek. Just in the short term, I trust him. He has closing experience. He's getting a lot of whiffs this year. The command has escaped him at times, but I just trust him. I trust that veteran presence. I trust his stuff. So if it's up to me, I'm giving Cishek the nod as a prototypical closer, but that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, this bullpen situation, man, they've been really good, and they continue to, I think we read that Bleacher Nation stat the last time. Since they made those shuffles, I think around April 7th, they have been a top bullpen in the league. But this is a very risky approach to things, and I know there's not an easy answer, and I haven't been exactly like super strong on like the Craig Kimbrell bandwagon because I think he has some concerns himself that obviously he would improve the state of this bullpen, but I don't think he's that like super solution that some, seem to think. And I think at this point we're close enough to the draft that they're not going to do it until they can wait and not give up that pick. But this is a dicey situation, man. So it's going to be something to just monitor pretty much on a daily basis because, for as good as Steve Cishek has been as a Cub, his usage is getting off the charts at this point. And you just have to wonder like how much you can rely on him to be that guy, every single day or, 2 of 3 days, whatever it ends up being. And it does put, probably some eyes on a guy like Carl Edwards because as we've talked about, he's a guy that has the stuff to be a high leverage, late inning closer type guy. And it's just a question of whether he's able to rein in that command because the issues that we saw with the command earlier this year and that we've seen throughout his career, you can't trust him in those situations. But he's had 2 really good outings since he came back. He was really good in his stint in the minors, lots of outings with no walks, clean innings. And it's similar to, I think, how we were looking at this bullpen in the beginning of the year. It's one of those things where you kind of just reward guys for stepping up and performing in big spots. We've seen Brandon Kinsler earn a lot more reps and higher leverage spots because he's been good in them. And I think that's what you have to keep doing going forward. I wouldn't jump feet first into saying, well, let's just see if Carl can do it. But I think you take it step by step with these guys and say, hey, if they get through it day 1, let's give them a day 2 and, keep going that way. But it's a dicey situation. It was dicey before. You take Strop out and you're playing with fire. I mean, that's just the way it is. This bullpen has been really good. But when you don't have a bona fide closer, you've got guys on the injured list and you're putting guys in roles that maybe they're not super familiar with. It's, an interesting situation. Let's use the word interesting. It's definitely not super fun. I wouldn't describe it as super fun. Most things around the Cubs right now are super fun, but certainly not all of them. So, but as far as this Milwaukee series is concerned, this is kind of a perfect spot for this series. The last series the Cubs lost was in Milwaukee to these Brewers. I think there's no better way to get to the even number of 10 series, having not lost one. Again, that stupid tie with the Angels just ruins how good this stat could be and how good these graphics could look. But I digress. it's the perfect way to kind of round this all out. The last one they lost was to the Brewers, and, now they have a chance to avenge that at home. And, similar to that Cardinals series, like, you want to beat up on the Marlins. You want to, you sweep them in Miami. You take 3 or 4 from them in Chicago. Like, you want to be doing that. You want to be racking up the wins against the good teams. But in a competitive division like the NL Central, you're going to make your money on performing against the teams that you need to beat. And the easiest way to kind of avoid big games down the stretch and in September, like we saw in 2018, is to take care of business when these teams especially come to your ballpark and, make it known, like, you're not going to come here and steal games from us at our ballpark. So just keep the winning ways going, man. I mean, again, it really, like, I don't think you can give this team enough credit for the way that they rebounded from that bad start early and the position that they put themselves in. The fact that they are in first place and, with the ability to try and create some distance. The Cardinals are blowing out, I think, the Pirates tonight, whoever they're playing. So they're going to get a win on Thursday night. But, with Milwaukee, kind of looking at you in second place, this is a great time to bring them into Wrigley Field and send them out of there with, a couple games back in the division. And other than that, I think that is all that we have for you for this episode. It was a fun series with the Marlins. It didn't start on a particularly fun note with the bullpen blowing that one on Monday, but 2 walk-offs after that and a solid 4-1 win on Thursday. It was another good series for the Cubs, so let's just hope that they can keep things rolling as Christian Yelich and the Milwaukee Brewers come to town. We, as always, thank you guys for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spreaker. And again, if we're not on the medium that you prefer to listen to podcasts, just let us know, and we will do the best we can to get on there. Brendan is at Cubs Related. I am at CF Cubs Related. You can find us and our work at Real Cubs Insider on Twitter and Instagram, and CubsInsider.com. As always, we thank you guys very much for listening. We've got another Sunday night baseball weekend with the Brewers here, so we will talk to you late on Sunday night, early Monday morning. And whether we are watching them walk off or win a very normal start where Darvish goes 4 and Montgomery goes 5 on Thursday, as always, go Cubs. A lot.